The latest Indonesian horror movie of 2025, Star Rainbow Clinic, has arrived. The film is based on a true story and was created by the same team behind a famous supernatural horror hit. Once again, it delivers terrifying scares. When restless spirits return, the truth will eventually tear through the darkness. The story begins at a clinic in the suburbs of Indonesia. A nurse is pushing a pregnant woman in labor past the therapy room when she makes a horrifying discovery. The doctor responsible for deliveries has hanged himself inside. After that incident, the clinic was shut down for renovations and investigations. It remained closed for 5 years before finally reopening. One day, Pika and Yaro arrive at the clinic to begin their internship. Waiting to greet them is Ida, the nurse who witnessed the tragedy 5 years earlier. She warmly introduces them to the clinic and then shows them to their dormitory rooms. But Yaro immediately feels that something is wrong with the place. An eerie atmosphere seems to linger everywhere. Sure enough, while looking for the restroom, something terrifying happens. A door in the distance suddenly closes on its own, catching Yaro's attention. Gathering her courage, she pushes the door open and steps inside. Unknowingly, she has entered the very room where the doctor took his own life 5 years ago. Without realizing it, she sits down on the toilet. Suddenly, the faucet outside turns on by itself. Yaro gets up and shuts it off, but the moment she turns around, she hears water running from the bathtub. Seeing that only clean water is flowing out, she casually starts washing her dirty clothes. Then she suddenly feels that something is not right. When she turns her head, she catches sight of a pair of ghostly feet walking behind her. At the same time, she hears the faint moaning of a woman. She quickly looks around, but everything appears normal. Thinking it was her imagination, she decides to leave. But the moment she steps out of the room, an unseen force seems to pull her back inside. Ida's expression instantly turns serious. Without saying much, she quickly takes Yaro away from the area. That night, Yaro and Pika are chatting happily when a woman suddenly walks down the hallway. Without a word, she enters the room and sits on one of the hospital beds. The moment Yaro notices her, she immediately gets off her own bed. She asks the woman whether she has an appointment, but the woman never says a single word. Sensing that something is wrong, Pika quickly backs away. But when she glances back, she sees the woman staring straight ahead with a strange smile frozen on her face. Trying to stay brave, Yaro asks for her name, but still receives no answer. Then she notices something even stranger. Drool begins slowly dripping from the corners of the woman's mouth. Although unsettled, Yaro takes out a tissue and carefully moves closer to wipe it away. Suddenly, the woman reaches toward Yaro's lower abdomen. At that exact moment, the lights go out. Startled, Yaro quickly pulls out her phone and uses it as a flashlight. To her shock, the woman has completely disappeared. Yaro rushes toward the door, hoping to escape, only to find it locked. Even the windows have mysteriously shut themselves. Then, from somewhere nearby, she hears the sound of glass shattering. Her entire body trembling, Yaro slowly walks forward to investigate, but the moment she turns around, the woman has vanished again. Fighting back her fear, Yaro reaches for the light switch. As soon as the lights come back on, she looks toward the mirror, and there, reflected behind her, she sees the woman sitting on her shoulders. Fortunately, Dr. Taito hears the commotion and rushes over just in time. Only then does Yaro finally calm down. Early the next morning, a clinic worker receives an emergency call. He is asked to travel nearly 30 kilometers into the suburbs to pick up a patient. While driving across a bridge, he finds himself stuck behind a large truck moving unusually slowly. Several times he tries to overtake it, but every attempt fails. After a while, he finally sees an opening and moves into the next lane, but disaster strikes in the very next second. As his vehicle pulls alongside the truck, preparing to pass it, a school bus suddenly appears from the opposite direction. Panicking, the driver jerks the steering wheel. Instead of avoiding danger, he crashes straight into the steel rods sticking out of the truck. One of the rods pierces through his head, killing him instantly. What nobody notices is that the strange woman also appears in his rearview mirror at that exact moment. The following day, his body is brought back to the clinic. Looking at the horrific condition of the corpse, Yaro is overwhelmed with guilt. The truth is that the night before the driver left, he had sexually harassed her. Because she was new at the clinic, she was too afraid to report him. All she could do was curse him in her heart and wish that he would die. To her shock, only one night later, the man really did die in a terrible accident. Even though Pika keeps comforting her and insists it was only an accident, Yaro still cannot forgive herself. What neither of them knows is that the nightmare is only beginning. 2 days later, another worker at the clinic runs into trouble. One night after finishing work, the lights suddenly go out. Moments later, rapid footsteps echo all around him. Then he notices something horrifying. A ghostly figure has crawled onto the ceiling behind him. The terrifying sight sends him running out of the building, but the path ahead is blocked by a small river. The only way across is a narrow wooden beam stretching to the opposite side. After a brief hesitation, he carefully steps onto it. At first, everything seems fine, but halfway across, he suddenly loses his balance and falls. Fortunately, both of his hands manage to grab the beam before he plunges into the water. Just then, the ghost appears again. Strangely, however, it does not kill him. After finally making it home, he realizes something important. The ghost is actually the doctor who died at the clinic 5 years ago. The truth is far darker than anyone imagined. The doctor did not commit suicide. The scene had been staged by this man and the driver who died earlier. Before he can process the revelation, the ghost appears once again. After 2 deaths in a row, Yaro becomes convinced that if she stays any longer, she will be next. Terrified, she breaks down crying and wants to quit immediately. But Pika still hopes to graduate successfully and begs Yaro to stay a little longer. That same night, another terrifying incident occurs. Yaro suddenly wakes up in the dormitory. The moment she looks up, her blood runs cold. The ghost is slowly crawling onto Pika's bed. Its tongue hangs unnaturally long, and saliva drips constantly from its mouth. Yaro is so frightened that she does not dare make a sound, but the ghost notices her anyway. It slowly turns and begins crawling toward her. Just as the creature reaches her, Pika suddenly wakes her up. Only then does Yaro realize she has been dreaming, but was it really just a nightmare? The following evening, Yaro's boyfriend comes to visit her at the dormitory. He clearly wants more than just a friendly conversation. Annoyed, Yaro immediately throws him out. Frustrated and burning with anger, the boyfriend rides away on his motorcycle. As he passes through a wooded area, he notices a long-haired woman standing alone beside the road. The man has no idea that the woman is not actually alive. The moment he sees her, evil thoughts enter his mind. Driven by his desires, he offers her a ride and heads toward his home. But before long, he begins experiencing strange hallucinations. In his mind, they are riding across a suspension bridge. The woman wraps her arms around his waist and tells him to keep going forward. What Yaro's boyfriend doesn't realize is that he is actually speeding toward the edge of a cliff. Moments later, his motorcycle flies off the edge. Although he is rushed to the hospital and survives, the damage is devastating. For the rest of his life, he will remain in a vegetative state. After hearing the news, Yaro and Pika rush to the hospital. But then the man's mother asks Pika to speak with her privately. Watching the two interact so closely, Yaro immediately senses that something is wrong. She soon learns the truth. Pika is actually her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend. The revelation completely shatters Yaro. Furious and heartbroken, she turns around and walks away. Pika quickly runs after her. Soon afterward, Yaro is brought back to the clinic. By now, so many strange incidents have occurred that Pika can no longer ignore them. He begins searching for answers online. During his research, he discovers that Dr. Lingo had an unusually close relationship with the deceased female doctor. Just then, Pika notices something outside the window. Dr. Lingo is standing there staring at him. The hatred in his eyes sends chills down Pika's spine. Determined to uncover the truth, Pika gathers his courage the next day and sneaks into Dr. Lingo's office. Inside, he discovers a photo album filled with locks of hair. Each page is labeled with a different name. To his shock, both Yaro's name and the name of the dead female doctor are listed inside. At that moment, Pika realizes something horrifying. Everything that has happened may be connected to Dr. Lingo. Just as he is about to leave, he nearly runs straight into the doctor. Terrified, he quickly hides behind the door. When Dr. Lingo notices that the album is missing, he immediately makes a phone call. Using the distraction, Pika slips away and escapes, but he has barely gotten far when he runs into another doctor from the clinic, Dr. Taito. Pika quickly shares everything he has discovered. To avoid attracting suspicion, the two meet at a warehouse on the outskirts of town. There, Dr. Taito reveals his own suspicions. For years, he has believed that the female doctor did not commit suicide 5 years ago. He believes she was murdered. Unfortunately, he never had enough evidence to prove it. That is why the case was never reopened. According to him, he reopened the clinic for 2 reasons. First, to continue serving the local residents, and second, to secretly investigate what really happened. Now, after hearing Pika's discoveries, he becomes convinced that Yaro is the next target. The two men immediately move her to a location they believe is safe, but to their horror, Yaro mysteriously disappears that very night. Pika searches everywhere, but there is no sign of her. With no other options left, he returns to the clinic. Then he hears a strange noise coming from the therapy room. Slowly approaching, he peers inside. There, he sees Yaro standing with her back turned toward him. She appears to be talking to someone, but he cannot make out the words. Then something terrifying happens. Frozen with fear, Pika cautiously steps closer to investigate. Suddenly, Yaro's eyes snap open. In one violent motion, she grabs him and drags him into the bathtub. At that moment, Pika finally sees the truth. The female doctor did not commit suicide 5 years ago. The real killer was Dr. Taito. He had drugged her by mixing medication into the water, causing her to lose consciousness. Afterward, he assaulted her. When the doctor woke up, she immediately decided to report him to the police, but Taito found out before she could do it. He dragged her into the therapy room and brutally murdered her. Then he forced the 2 workers who later died to help stage the scene as a suicide by hanging. Just then, the vision ends, and the scene returns to reality. Pika is still being held underwater by Yaro. Fortunately, Dr. Taito suddenly arrives and pulls him out, saving his life. But now that Pika knows the truth, seeing the real killer standing before him fills him with terror. As he helps Yaro leave the room, she finally confesses something. She tells him that she was also assaulted by Taito. He threatened her afterward, leaving her too afraid to speak out. Realizing the danger they're in, they decide they must escape immediately. But while Pika is checking their surroundings, he suddenly notices that Yaro has disappeared. Taito has taken her hostage. He warns Pika not to tell anyone the truth, otherwise he will kill Yaro. Seeing the hatred in Taito's eyes, Pika tries to run, but he is quickly captured and slammed against a wall. Pika fights back and strikes him across the face. Enraged, Taito drives a knife straight through Pika's hand. Just when it seems like Pika is about to die, Lingo suddenly appears. Attacking from behind, he manages to choke Taito unconscious. After giving Pika's wounded hand a quick bandage, Lingo finally reveals everything he knows. The murdered female doctor was actually his fiancée. After they had been together for some time, he discovered discovered that she was pregnant. Not long afterward, news broke that she had supposedly taken her own life. Lingo immediately sensed that something was wrong, so he came to the clinic and began investigating on his own. Before long, he uncovered evidence pointing directly to Taito. He reported everything to the police, but even after the investigation, the authorities still ruled the death a suicide. It became clear that Taito was not an easy man to bring down. Pika suggests that they destroy the therapy room. If they do that, perhaps the female doctor's spirit can finally find peace. But before they can act, Taito suddenly regains consciousness. He grabs a knife and viciously wounds Lingo. Pika quickly helps Yaro escape. However, Taito has no intention of letting them go. He follows them all the way to an abandoned factory. Before making his final move, he reveals the story behind his descent into darkness. When he was a child, his mother suffered from a serious illness. The pain and suffering he witnessed left deep scars on him. Years later, after growing up, he finally poisoned his own father. That was the moment his path into darkness truly began. After finishing his story, he prepares to kill both Yaro and Pika. Just when all hope seems lost, the longtime nurse from the clinic arrives. She stabs Taito with a sharp blade. Moments later, she moves toward Yaro to check her injuries, but Taito is still alive. Without warning, he attacks again and slashes the nurse's throat. After eliminating the obstacle, he once again turns his attention toward Yaro and Pika. At that moment, the spirit of the murdered female doctor seems to sense the danger. She immediately possesses Yaro. In the next second, Yaro becomes unstoppable. She grabs a nail gun from the ground and repeatedly fires it at Taito. Nail after nail slams into his body. Soon he is pinned down and unable to move. Then the vengeful spirit begins her brutal revenge. She launches herself at Taito. First, she tears a long gash across his face. Then she violently rips one of his eyes from its socket. But just as she is about to finish him once and for all, something unexpected happens. Her spirit suddenly begins turning to ash. Within seconds, she completely disappears. The reason is simple. Despite his severe injuries, Lingo managed to destroy the therapy room. With the room finally gone, the murdered doctor's spirit is able to find peace at last. As for Taito, he will now face justice through the law. The film uses brutal violence and unsettling horror to deliver a powerful warning. Evil may hide in the shadows for a time, but the determination of the dead and the courage of the living will eventually bring the truth into the light. This is more than just a horror story. It is a reflection of human greed, corruption, and obsession. For 5 years, the Star Rainbow Clinic hid its horrifying secrets behind a mask of normalcy. But eventually, blood and truth tore that mask apart. When Yaro and Pika stepped into this cursed place, they uncovered far more than a restless spirit. They uncovered the darkest corners of human nature itself. Behind Dr. Taito's kind and respectable appearance was a monster driven by greed and cruelty. The murdered doctor's spirit became a force of vengeance, crying out against injustice, and the truth, like a sharp nail, pierced through every lie. When the voices of the dead finally speak, the darkness can no longer hide the truth.